Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review for you all, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2024, directed by Osgood Perkins, and this film is called Longlegs. So Longlegs is about an FBI agent who's investigating a series of grisly murders. So there's a serial killer known as Longlegs. He's leaving his messages behind each murder scene, and they're very cryptic. And so it's a very strange case, and this FBI agent believes that she's onto it, she's starting to track him down, but the further she tracks him down, the more she realises that she is starting to lose herself in the investigation. And so things are about to get very, very weird, and what happens at that point on is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Longlegs. You pretty much have to be living under a rock not to have heard of Longlegs. This is a film that has been hyped beyond belief, and a lot of people have been saying that it's the scariest film of the last 20 years, one of the best horror films ever made, and one that you just have to watch. And so I was waiting with great anticipation, and the first week that this movie was released here in cinemas in Australia, I definitely had to go and get a ticket. Now, yes, I was very skeptical. You know, a lot of these movies are overhyped, a lot of people reviewing the films, some of them said it was the greatest film, some of them saying it was overrated, it was rubbish. Some people absolutely hated it. And they're the type of films that I go for the most, the movies that really split audiences in the middle. And Longlegs is definitely one of those movies. Now, Osgood Perkins is a very good director. I've actually reviewed a couple of his movies from the past, and I was very impressed by them. And so that was an added incentive to go and watch this movie, because I was talking about this director before a lot of people were. And so I had my fingers crossed that this is going to be a knockout. It stars Micah Monroe, Nicolas Cage, and so there's ingredients there to make a really, really interesting experience. And after watching this movie, I will say that it was a very interesting experience. Now, there are two questions. Is it overrated? Is it overhyped? And my answer to that question, unfortunately, is yes, it is overhyped. A movie that has this much build-up is going to be very, very difficult to live up to the expectations. You're going to be expecting something that's going to completely blow you away. If you're not familiar with the more extreme side of cinema, you might be blown away. If you're not totally familiar with horror, then this is a film that will really get to you. But if you are a fan of horror and you've been watching horror for a very long time, this is a film that does have really, really solid attributes, but unfortunately it's not the movie it's built up to be. It's not the scariest film in 20 years, it's far from it. And so that was ultimately my biggest criticism of the movie, is that it does fall victim to hype, which is not necessarily the film's problem itself, it's just the marketing. When you build something up really, really good, you can actually fool yourself into thinking that it was a bad film. And although I didn't fool myself into thinking it was a bad film, I wanted a lot more based on what I was expecting. It's very hard to steer away from all the hype, but this is what hype can do to a film. It can either make it or it can break it. So I would say I wouldn't have said it broke it, but for those of you expecting a completely different experience, you might feel that way. The second question is it a good film? And absolutely yes, it is a very, very good film. Now, what I loved about this movie the most is Osgood Perkins' trademark of atmosphere. This is atmospherically suffocating. This is a movie that was incredibly creepy, and I was unnerved from the very first frame. The way the movie shot, the way the movie looks, the cinematography, the score, all adds up to something that you just feel really, really awkward. I felt as though I was never comfortable. Everything from each frame, I thought something was going to go wrong. I wasn't quite sure what was going to go wrong, but something was really behind me, sending the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and you're not quite sure what it is. And that is what atmosphere does. That's what psychology does. Psychologically, this movie is an absolute masterpiece, and this is something that Osgood Perkins does very, very well. He builds a world in the level of invisibility, stuff that you can't see, stuff that you can't get away with being lazy. And so this is a sign of a very, very good filmmaker, and Longlegs demonstrates what a good filmmaker Os Perkins actually is. So each frame, each scene, it just feels as though it's building up to something that it's going to lead to catastrophic consequences. And because you don't know exactly what those consequences are, because this is a very unique film, I thought that was what really drove the suspense. And that's what really captured my interest, and it never lets go. And it slowly just tightens the grip around your neck, and you feel as though you're running out of air. And so there's a level of vulnerability, level of desperation through the film in a very, very subtle way. So if you are a fan of psychological tension and psychological horror, then Longlegs is definitely one for you. It had shades of David Fincher's Seven. It had shades shades of other films, but it never rips off those movies. Osgood Perkins definitely has his own style, and that own style is really emphasised in this movie. It's a very dreary film, but the way the camera is used is very scary. You feel as though someone is watching you. You don't know who's watching you, but you feel as though there is a set of eyes on you from start to finish, and so you're never really comfortable. There's no real safety net, and so that was absolutely fantastic. I thought the script was actually quite decent. For the majority, I thought Micah Munro's character was phenomenal. She does an outstanding job at portraying someone who's very awkward, and just her awkward nature makes it very uncomfortable as well. It makes me, I felt very off watching her, and as she interacts with other people, I kept thinking, what is with this character? And so the movie begs a lot of questions, and it's those wanting those answers that keeps you captivated. And so the answers with this FBI agent, it starts to evolve this character in a way that I thought Micah Munro did a fantastic job at actually giving you someone to sympathise for, but someone that has a lot of interest. The curiosity levels I thought were through the roof with Micah Munro, and that's exactly what I want from a movie to capture my attention. This is why the movie never gets boring. So that was absolutely phenomenal. And there are some really weird scenes, and the really bizarre sort of qualities of this movie intensifies that sense of awkwardness, intensifies that sense that you don't have control and you're running into a world that is just, I felt as though there was nowhere to seek safety. I was free falling down a very bizarre but a very, very dark tunnel, and I thought as though the destination, I didn't know what the destination was going to, where it was going to lead me to, but I knew that it wasn't going to be good, because as the movie goes along, it starts to snowball in a really tense psychological effect. So the overall ending I thought was actually quite shocking. There are some scenes of violence that I thought were quite hard hitting, and so that was very good. But unfortunately, this leads me to the problems of this film. Now, yes, it is a very good film, but unfortunately for me, I thought as though it was teetering on the edge of being absolutely brilliant. Now, there is an absolutely phenomenal line of dialogue in the movie Seven, David Fincher's Seven, where John Doe tells the detectives, in today's world, you simply can't tap someone on the shoulder to get their attention. You need to hit them over the head with a sledgehammer. And I thought that was an absolutely brilliant line, because it's all about desensitization in today's world. We see things and we're not easily shocked. And so for me, usually I love psychological tension. As I said, it's the stuff that is very hard to do, and you know, graphic violence is a cheap trick. But graphic violence can be very, very good if it is the result of all the tension that is built up through the psychology. And I thought this movie had such an unnerving and unbearable psychological quality to it that if this movie hit me with more of a sledgehammer in the violence, it would have been an absolutely brilliant film. It would have been right up there with Martyrs. Martyrs was a psychological nightmare, but at the same time, that really graphic violence was a conclusion of all that build-up. And so you say to yourself, you don't want to see that level of violence again, so you hope that the next person doesn't suffer a similar fate. And this movie, yes, the violence was actually quite shocking in some areas, but there were other moments where I thought it could have just dialed the tone up a little bit more, and it would have had that sledgehammer effect, and that sledgehammer effect would have just capped off that nastiness, that fact that I was waiting for something really bad to happen, and when that bad thing happens, if it just had much more of an impact, I thought as though it really would have nailed an overall horror experience. And so I just felt as though it didn't have that sledgehammer effect that I wanted it to have, and if it did have that sledgehammer effect, it would have lived up to all the hype. It would have been one of the scariest films ever made, because of the fact, as I said, there is a conclusion to all the build-up. But once the build-up comes to that conclusion, yes, it was shocking in some degree, but if you are a fan of extreme cinema, you feel as though it didn't really reward you in the way that it wants, that you really want it to. And so it sounds like a sick kind of thing to say, that you wanted more graphic violence, but usually that's a bad thing because it's a cheap trick. But I thought in this case, that's the thing that was missing, just that extra sense of nastiness to really cap off all the unbearable sort of tension that psychology has. And I also have a little issue with Nicolas Cage as Longlegs. Now, yes, he was very, very creepy, and at the start of the film there is one scene that I thought was phenomenal, where you don't really see him very much, but you hear him and you see his mannerisms, and it's just incredibly unnerving. It's one of the best characters in a horror film. But then the more you get to see this guy, the more of a caricature he starts to become. I felt as though it was typical Nicolas Cage overacting, and there were some scenes where it borders on the line of being a comedy. It's just a very comedic sort of touch that this character has. Therefore, that caricature sense takes it out of the realms of reality, and it just felt as though it was a movie that was bordering, as I said, on that darkly humorous tone, and therefore it does release some sort of pressure. And so the further the film goes on, I thought as though Longlegs was losing his effect. The less you see him, I actually thought it was far more terrifying, but the more you see him, you feel as though, okay, it's a little bit silly. The overacting is typical with Nicolas Cage. He does a good job as Longlegs. There are some scenes that were absolutely mesmerising, but there are other scenes where I thought as though he goes a little bit too far, and it releases the tension valve just a little bit. But overall, it's still a very good film. If you are a fan of Osgood Perkins, then this is a masterclass in psychological tension. Micah Munro delivers a fantastic performance as a very uncomfortable, very interesting character, and there are moments that unfold in the film that I thought were riveting, and the story, it's a very unique story. So it does dare to be different. This is a police procedural kind of film, but it does delve into other areas of horror that I thought was a risk, but I thought Osgood Perkins, for the majority of the film, actually did a fairly decent job. But as I said, those little areas of the movie I wanted to be a little bit better, and had that have happened, I thought as though this would have been absolutely a mesmerising masterpiece. But there are qualities in this movie that were absolutely phenomenal, and as a result of that, I'm going to give Longlegs 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.